Welcome back. In this video I've selected out a series of photographs that we photographed actually at a workshop in the middle of the day to teach how to photograph in the middle of the day. And obviously I thought it would be helpful for those of you that do have to shoot in the middle of the day to talk about how to process something like this. What we're going to do is we're going to keep it rather sweet just because the shoot is very sweet. I want it to be a light edit, something that just adds a little bit of consistency to the images whilst not going over the top. We've done lots of over the top editing, so now we're just going to draw it back and just go for a nice, sweet, light edit. So if we have a look at this, I'm just going to open up this image. We had a reflector, as you can see. And over here, I mean, we shot in the shade, but we've still got lots of dappled light, and that's something that even when you are shooting in the shade that you have to deal with in the middle of the day. So if we open up, say, this image, you'll see that we have dappled light actually on them, and we're losing some detail back here. So we need to figure out how we can handle that within Lightroom. So I'm just going to select out one of the images that has a fairly big amount of blowouts. How about this one? What a gorgeous family they are. Aren't they beautiful? So now I'm going to edit this for you and then we'll sync them. Okay, so what I'm going to do firstly is we just want to add in a little bit of blue actually, and a little bit of green. Now I know that looks crazy at the moment, so just bear with me. I'm trying to bring that detail back here of the greens. And then we might go and add a little bit of exposure. Okay, a fair bit actually. And I'm going to minus the highlights all the way down. Minus the whites all the way down. But I am now going to add in some of the blacks. Okay, and the shadows, I want some detail back in those shadows now. Okay, so I'll just put that at plus 26. Now that it's completely blown out, I need to work backwards. So I'm going to go into this square that I'm always working in, this one here, and just lower the exposure on them a touch. Okay, so now that I've done that, I really need to go in to our hue saturations and fiddle with those. So I'm going to make the oranges a little bit more yellow. Okay, actually we might work on the yellows and leave the oranges alone. Okay. And the greens, this is really important. I'm going to add in some blue into the greens here and change the saturation down. I don't really want that to be too saturated. Okay, just make that maybe about 36. Trying to get it in the middle there. And then I want to darken the green. So looks crazy, I know. Okay, the blues. Now the blue I need to stand out a little, so I'm just going to raise that up a little. I wanted to be able to see those blues there. Okay. Alright, now this is the important part. This is where we bring the colour back in. So firstly I'm going to pick out a very slight warmth on the highlights. And I'll make the hue warm. The saturation up just a touch. The shadows are really important. I'm going to again pick out a warmth, and there we go, we're starting to bring that detail back in. Can you see it? And I'm going to basically leave that alone where it is now. Okay, so now if we go down to highlight tone priority, I do want to give it a little bit of a vignette. Okay, and I'm going to change the midpoint down. just so that it goes to the middle of them a little bit better. And the roundness, of course, up a bit. Okay. Now this is important down here in the shadows. I'm going to actually make the shadows again slightly green, but the primary greens down here in the camera calibration, I'm going to move them to go yellow. Okay. So now we have a whole lot of green going on. So now what I need to do is go back up to the hue saturation of our greens and bring that back down and play with the luminance here a little of those greens. And the yellows, maybe, I do want to keep them green, but I've got a little bit of green. Here we go. I need to make the yellows quite green to match it. There we go. So this might affect their skin tones if we do a sync, but we'll see how that goes in a minute. So let's go to before and after. Now, as you can see, I think that's brought back quite a bit of detail in that photograph that wasn't there. And it's done it fairly simply. So now all we need to do is grab other photos from this series. So let's go to this one, this one, this one. And we'll press sync on those. So we've pressed shift and we're going to press sync, and we'll press sync on those, and let's watch them pop up. Okay. Now that was from the same scene, so let's go backwards and press sync on some other ones the other direction. Okay. Okay, so this is this way. There we go. That's really brought that detail back in. And it's actually even lightened them here. Again. So depending on your style, you could really leave it at this point and just to add a little bit of maybe some skin softening. And a lot of people are doing that these days. They're just using Lightroom. So I'm just even going to, let's just grab this image since we're here. So I would, if I was going to leave this in Lightroom, I would just increase the blacks there and tweak the shadows. Okay, now I might even just drag this down a little to put detail back in the blowouts. Let's see what else we can do here by doing that. Okay. So now the image is full. So now we need to go in and add in maybe some saturation. But I might do that with vibrance because it doesn't seem to take the skin tones as much. So I'll just add some vibrance in. And keeping in mind those blues, those greeny blues again, I do want to go down here to the primaries and just make those. You could actually go very green on that if you wanted, or you could make them blue. So I'm just going to make them a little bit bluer. Shadows a little bit greener. Okay. So now it looks like they're really in the grass there, and it's a lovely, beautiful afternoon. Okay, so all I would want to do now is grab the exposure just slightly. Now their skin, I'm fairly happy with the way that it's exposed now. That's obviously a mask so that you can see what it's doing. However, just raising that up a little bit and adding a little bit of contrast brings them into play more. Okay, and down here a little. Alright, now we could even add in a little bit more of a vignette here, but this is just getting picky. Okay, so now that I've done that, so now I've done a second tweak. Now I would do is grab the same series, so we've got the one next to it. So let's have a look at this one actually. Okay, so this is with the previous sync. and this is with the extra edits. So it's just made it a little bit fuller, and that might not be to everyone's taste as well. In fact, even looking at that, that's too dark for me now. So I might just lighten that up again down there. Alright, but then you could sync the extra bits. Of course, it won't take the brushwork, but let's have a look at this one. If I press sync again on the ones that are similar, there we go. Let's have a look. How did it work on that one? There we go. So it's just made the greens more green, and then I need to go in and add that brushwork in. Okay, and I would also add it in here because that's very shadowy now. And you could even desaturate that a little. Okay. Alright, so let's go back to one of these images. Okay, so we'll go back to this one. Now, what I'm attempting to do is really do a full Lightroom edit. I'm just going to, I want to lower the exposure, add in some greeny yellow in that foreground. Let's just see how we go with this. Okay. So that's obviously the mask. Let's desaturate it a little. And it actually is green-blue that it wants to be. There we go. Alright, I think that helps bring attention to this area here. There's obviously something down there that was blue. But we could go in there again and get a new brush and just remove that by adding yellow to it. So to speak, we could work on that. Fairly easy, there we go. And adding green in. Okay, so now I get a new brush again and raise the exposure just on them, very slightly, just on mum and dad. Add in some contrast. Okay, so keeping in mind again that this was shot in the middle of the day, I think we haven't done too badly. Just going to raise the blacks again there. Alright. Okay, so now at this point you could run a portraiture, which is a plugin that softens the skin, and you can do that actually in Lightroom. You don't even have to take it into Photoshop. But this is a handy technique if you are, say, wanting to edit weddings, things like that quickly. Alright, now the other thing is, just looking at it, I wondered if we've raised the luminance on the blues, but should we desaturate those blues? I guess that's up to the taste, but I don't know, I kind of like the sky here with the blues in it. Alright, so even though this is supposed to be a video on just Lightroom, I couldn't help myself. I thought I'll take it into Photoshop and show you how quickly we could really make this more consistent, just with a quick edit. So what I want to do straight away is blend that background in a little bit, the foreground actually, more than the background. It's just too out there. All I'm going to do is grab a solid color and I'll select a green out. Doesn't really matter what green it is at this point. Reduce the opacity of that down. And I'm just going to erase off with the black brush. So I've got to make that black. And I'm going to raise that off on them at, make sure that's 100%. Okay. So I'm just erasing that off. Now it can be fairly quick because I'm just going to reduce that down a fair bit, and also I'm going to remove it from around them anyway. Okay, and then I grab a brush at 43%, a bigger brush. Just get rid of it off the background here. Okay. Alright, so now straight away, if I do a before and after, it's just helping to draw attention to them and fill in that foreground a little. Okay. Okay, so I can Control J and duplicate this layer, and Control Alt E, so I've got a new layer. So I selected those layers and I made a new layer here, because what I'd like to do is do a patch. Now, even though this was shot at the middle of the day, and it's funny because if you go back to Lightroom, it says it was shot at 6 p.m., but it wasn't. So obviously my clock is out. It was at a workshop, so like I said, that's very funny. Anyway, there will be other people around who can vouch for me. So here we are. I'm just patching off that sun off the background there. And this is being really particular. It doesn't, it doesn't matter too much. But if I do a before and after, I think it draws your attention back to them even more. All right. Now, while I'm here, I would just like to saturate up that red house, a little. I think that's quite sweet. Fade that off. Okay. And the pinks here, she's a girl, so just bring that out a little. And to taste, we might just add a little bit of an S-curve on the family. There we go. And on the overall image. So now I have talked about that plug-in portraiture before. Now, like I said, there is a video that teaches you how to do it without the plugin, but I'm all for shortcuts. But to show you what it is, you go Filter, Imagematic, Portraiture. I usually have it on default. Now the reason is because I don't want to make their skin too soft. In fact, I don't really do that much at all. I have it set to a new layer and I press OK, and all it does is it softens off their skin as fast as that. Now, professional retouchers don't use it because it doesn't put grain back under, but it does work. I think that looks a little bit better, and that was done fairly quickly. Now, it's not to everyone's taste. I mean, you might want to add in some saturation, or, there's a lot that you could do, really. Okay, so we'll go back to the Lightroom. This is with Lightroom done, and then we go back to the Photoshop. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that video.